Before we start, if you could do me a favor, if you could like and subscribe, and please share the video. These technical videos, certainly dedicated to a telescope like this, don't seem to do very well on YouTube, so it would be really appreciated when you find value in this video if you could like and subscribe, and please share it so that others may hopefully benefit from some of the knowledge here that I'll share with you all to hopefully tame the Epsilon180 telescope. Plan for today is to basically tear this thing down and to collimate it from the very beginning, from first principles, and to show you all the potential pitfalls that you may face with your own Epsilon180ED telescope. That's the plan. So before we start, make sure you have all the necessary tools that you think you're going to need for the telescope collimation available to you. Because the last thing you want to do is to start a process like this and then have to go searching for a tool that you didn't think you needed, but you now do. Take things slow, methodically, and you will be able to easily collimate this telescope. Now, before we start, I want to issue a warning. My assumption here is this telescope that you have is of unknown origin, i.e. you could have purchased the telescope second-hand, and someone before you has potentially tried to collimate the telescope and may have been, well, having various degrees of success or failure with that collimation. If, however, you have a factory fresh Epsilon from Takahashi or your local supplier, you do not need to do what I'm doing now. And I will point out the steps that you would need to follow, let's say, to confirm that the collimation of the telescope is good. However, right now, the first step for me is to remove the secondary from the Epsilon. So we'll do that now, and I'll probably speed it up a little bit because essentially it's held in place. Of course, the secondary is held by these 3 grub screws in position so that it remains collimated, and the tension here is held on this second, let's say, thumb screw. So I'm going to begin by removing the secondary. That's a big lot of nuts. It should not be difficult. It should not be. And again, the other point I would like to make as well, if it comes back to an issue that you may find with your secondary, especially when it's a second-hand telescope, you do not need to be swinging on these grub screws or locking nuts to keep it in place once it's collimated. And again, the other point I would like to make as well, it comes back to an issue that you may find with your secondary, especially when it's a second-hand telescope. You do not need to be swinging on these grub screws or locking nuts to keep it in place once it's collimated. Just hand tie it snug, just a couple of pounds of force is already enough. Again, all the tools are here available. A good set of metric Allen keys, of course, are needed. It's of course a Japanese telescope, so you're not going to be using any imperial Allen keys on this telescope. And again, just you can see I'm not using, to break these grub screws, I'm not needing to use a lot of force. And that's it. You can already see now with my telescope, the secondary is loose. And I can essentially remove the thumb screw. Because of the offset in the spider, you'll not be able to bring it through the front. So what you need to do is to take the secondary back, lower it down and place it inside the telescope tube, like so. What we'll do now is spin the Epsilon around, and I will take the primary mirror cell off, and then we can take the secondary out of the telescope and discuss the secondary a little bit more. One of the first challenges or issues you may face when looking to remove your primary mirror is you need to locate these little grub screws, which are placed 320 degrees around the mirror cell itself. Make sure they're loose, or at least make sure this top one is, and the ones around the other end of the primary mirror cell are not tight, otherwise you'll be struggling and wondering why you can't remove the primary mirror cell. Okay, so let's double check the grub screw. So mine is loose. That's not impeding the removal of the primary mirror cell. With this, the older style of ED180 with these collimation screws, you need a coin or a large screwdriver. Again, these shouldn't be very tight, and if that's one message that's going to be consistent throughout this video, is nothing here needs to be over tightened. This is effectively, well, I consider a telescope to be a scientific instrument. They need to be looked after, very well. I typically baby mine as you can see from the condition of my Epsilon. And once these are out, we can literally just bring the primary mirror cell back and out of the telescope. This is actually a thing of beauty. Okay, mine's a little bit dusty, but the construction of this primary mirror cell, they just don't make telescope mirror cells like this anymore because of all the cost saving, of course. But there you go. The primary mirror cell is now out of my Epsilon. And of course, if I wasn't able to collimate this, I would be in extremely big trouble now. Okay, let's discuss the secondary. My secondary will be a little bit different from yours. You can probably already see that now. I have a 3D printed mask over my secondary because I had to reflock my secondary mirror because the original material was moldy. First positive point for Takahashi. On the secondary, I'll try to just get the reflections out of the way. You can see the secondary spotted, see it? There's a little spot in the secondary mirror itself, and that is to aid in collimation. That's really important that you take note of this spot. Now, secondly, I have added a stainless steel disc which is glued by just standard rubber glue or plasticized glue. Your standard, I don't really want to mention a brand here on YouTube. It's not araldited. You could araldite a disc or a washer to the back of your secondary. That's up to you. But I have put a stainless steel washer here. Why? One of the issues you'll find, especially when you've got the second-hand telescope, is that the back of the secondary, when you remove it, you need to check it for dimples, dints. If somebody has been over cranking those grub screws, trying to collimate the telescope, and in their frustration they've applied too much force, then with the best will and intention in the world, even aircraft grade aluminium or wherever aluminium this is made from, will not stand up to that because you have a steel bolt pushing against an aluminium surface. And this is maybe your first clue to why you might not be able to collimate your Epsilon. Basically, if those indentations have been created in the back of the aluminium back of this secondary, then all the little micro adjustments that you want to make to try to collimate this are just going to result in the secondary just falling back into place because of the dimples that have been created in the back of the aluminium face. There's two solutions to that. There's a solution I'm proposing here, and that is to get yourself a very large stainless steel or steel washer and glue it onto the back of the secondary. It only needs to be about 2 millimeters thick, and it needs to be under the points. As you can see here, it's very difficult to see because of course this is very hard now. It's very difficult to see where the grub screws are actually touching down on this and holding it in position. So that's the first thing that you need to check with your telescope. If that has happened, you need to take a small file. Do not go aggressive on this, but take a file, some sandpaper and flatten the back. And then maybe take my advice, find yourself a large steel washer or stainless steel washer and glue it on the back of this under where the grub screws touch down on the secondary itself. That will be such a huge improvement and allow you to make all the little micro adjustments that you need to make to get your secondary in position when trying to collimate. Okay, we're back here at the front of the telescope, and hopefully you'll see why we had to remove now the secondary mirror. Because of the offset design of this, what I want you to do first and foremost with your Epsilon is to check the geometry of your Epsilon. And what I mean by that is make sure your spider is actually centered in the telescope tube. You have Allen keys on the outside and these locking nuts on the inside that help position the secondary. But to do that, you need access to this little hole here in the front of the disc, because essentially the bolt where the secondary is fixed in the telescope is offset, it's not centered. So now with this little pinhole available to you, you can place an Allen key like I have here and start measuring for each of the vanes to the outside of the tube, and then adjust those vanes as necessary to make sure that this is centered inside the tube of the telescope. Of course, I'm not going to do mine because I know mine is already centered. You need to check yours, because unless you can confirm that, let's say from the paint, that there's no markings and nothing has been messed with, and that it looks already centered by checking it, I would double check this. Again, like I say, you can use here something like a digital vernier, which is easy to set up to check the distance from there to that pinhole inside there. You can set this up and then of course spin it around the telescope to check that your spider is in the center. As long as it's within, let's say, 1 millimeter, half a millimeter of the center, that will be good enough to continue with the collimation of the telescope. Once you've done that, then of course we can put the secondary back in to the telescope, and we're just going to put it in there lightly and to begin with, and I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, we've reached an important point now. The secondary is back in, it's loose, it's just resting on the grub screws, it's not fixed in place at this moment in time. It's time to start to build up your collimation tool, but only take the visual back adapter and screw your eyepiece holder on, because we're about to use a laser, and this is the one and only time we will use a laser on this Epsilon to collimate it. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the corrector. You cannot collimate these telescopes with the corrector in place, so the corrector comes out. Let's put that safely over here. And now we screw in your visual adapter with the eyepiece holder on top. Screw it so it beds down. Now, another important point that I didn't mention that I am actually doing here, I know the focus position of my focuser, and it is actually at its focus position. So that's another little trick that you can do when you're collimating these telescopes. If you've already tried to focus this and maybe had a night under the stars, and maybe it wasn't the best night, but you managed to achieve focus, if you can leave the focuser at the actual focus position when you collimate, that will also aid in improving the image quality of your images when you finally get this telescope running correctly. Now, laser. I said in one of my previous videos you need a good quality laser, a laser that itself can be collimated and that you've confirmed is of a known good quality. Please make sure you use a good laser and that one you know is collimated, because otherwise, you know, this could be just a wonderful tool to decollimate your telescope just as easily. So make sure you have a good one. Now we're going to place that inside the Epsilon in the eyepiece holder. There we go. I'm going to turn it on. Now, as you can see, or maybe you can't see, not at the moment at least, that doesn't benefit us at all, right? Now, we bring our special tool in. Remember, I told you about the special tool? Now we're going to place this where the primary mirror cell should be, and we're going to try to adjust the secondary. Our first course adjustment, let's say, is to get that laser passing through the hole that's in the center of this disc. That's our first step in this process to recollimate this telescope. I would make this disc, it's so easy to do. It's just, as I said before, it's a piece of 3mm hardboard cut to, what I remember making the last video, 252mm in diameter, which I then put a little bit of shimmy tape on it to make this a snug fit. I'll bring you in close now, so hopefully you can see the laser and where it lands on this disc at the back of the telescope. I'll try my best to make that visible to you. Unfortunately, I forgot a very important point here because my secondary is already set up. What you can see on the image here is you need to adjust the secondary linearly, allow it to move in and back out of the telescope to get the position of it correct under the focuser. Do this with the crosshair in place and make sure the dot of the secondary is falling under the crosshair. Take a little time and make sure you do this step first, please. So hopefully you can see the laser spot in there already. I'm probably going to have to record this twice, once with my phone and once with the camera, but let's see how we go. And our task now, of course, you can rotate the secondary as well. So you need to rotate this so to minimize the error, but also to make sure that the 45 degrees, of course, pointing upwards towards your focuser. But once you've got this pretty much nicely set, another tip here, as you can see, is to make the shape even around this circular disc of the secondary. You can see there that that's more or less correct. There where the secondary is now, it's more or less correct, not just because I've minimized the error of the laser pointing back at our special collimation tool, but also because of the outside shape of the secondary against the circular disc on the spider. So there's two clues to, let's say, get the secondary in a reasonable position before you begin adjusting. And now it's just a case of just adjusting the grub screws. So bring that up. Maybe need to send this across just a little bit, just there, up a little bit more. Well, I think you get the idea, right? There, now, and up, just up, there. Now, it's actually going tight on me right now. So you need a process of course, there you go. That's it right there. So right now, what I've done, we're shining the laser down onto the secondary, and the secondary is reflecting that laser back onto our special collimation tool, and the laser is now passing right through the center of our special collimation tool. Let me try and get in here with a phone as well. So hopefully what I'll do is I'll hit record, and there also with a little bit of light you can see the special Takahashi collimation tool is now showing the laser passing through, the majority of light passing through of that special the special collimation tool. And in fact, if I come out here, well, you can see it's there. It's hitting the wall at the back. We can actually put the laser back in, tighten that up, and we can turn it on again and see where we stand now with the primary mirror. And actually, look at that. If I take the phone, let's bring the phone in. It's always difficult to record this type of stuff with the mirror. But if I bring you in here, look at how close we are inside the donut of the rear cell. But you can do the same, just follow the steps I'm taking, take your time with them, and of course you'll become more and more familiar with your own telescope as you do this. Hopefully once you've done this, one thing I can promise you is these telescopes are actually built like tanks. So once you've got it collimated, or very close to being perfectly collimated, the collimation tends to keep for months on end, maybe even years if you treat it nicely and don't bump it too much. This collimation will hold for a long, long time. So that is something I can promise you. But now we're at the stage where we have to build up the full collimation tool. Okay, the time has come to build up the full Takahashi collimation tool. And if it hasn't become apparent by now to you, I think another mistake people make with these telescopes, so I'll make this explicit right now. You cannot collimate these telescopes under a night sky with a star, because this is not, I hope you realise by now, your typical Newton telescope. And I'm not talking about the hyperbolic mirrors, the hyperbolic primary mirror. What I'm talking about is the fact that because this is an offset design, your donuts, your unfocused stars will always look slightly wrong. And if you try to make them concentric, get them concentric under the night sky, what you've actually done is decollimated your telescope. You've got to use the Takahashi tools. And in fact, with the bigger telescopes, and I think this may also be true for the 160 as well, because the offset is pretty slight, it's only about 10-15 millimeters, you'll struggle to see it if you look down the telescope just visually without the crosshair. Because the crosshair restricts the field of view, you will more easily see the offset of the offset nature of the telescope. So now the full tool gets screwed into the top of the telescope, and now the ideal condition is to take the telescope and point it up at a white object, at the sky, an overcast sky, and start to make your adjustments to the secondary mirror, and then finally to the primary mirror. So what you've got now, if you remember, we have a dot on the secondary that needs to fall under the cross. So the cross needs to first be lined up with the dot on the secondary. Then the dot of this secondary, of course, needs to be in the center of the primary. So once you have the cross over the dot of the secondary, and the dot of the secondary is inside perfectly in the middle of the donut of the primary, then you're collimated. Now this is, of course, now a very slow iterative process. Because this telescope was more or less, the collimation wasn't totally destroyed when I took it apart, this will be pretty close, and I'll show you that now using the phone. So I'll have to try to get the phone lined up with the peephole so that you can see what I'm seeing in the telescope, to make those minor adjustments to make the collimation perfect. And again, I want to stress this to you, you cannot collimate this in the dark under the night sky with a star, because if you make your donut concentric, you've decollimated the scope. You need to point the telescope now you could use something like a net curtain, something that will give you a nice white diffuse light, strong enough that you can see all the mirrors and the dot and the donut inside the telescope, and then slowly but surely make these minor adjustments to the first to secondary. Make sure the cross is lined up with the dot on the secondary, then finally make sure by adjusting the primary that the donut is lining up with the secondary, and you'll have to do a very tiny iterative process between the two of them to collimate. It's difficult to describe the total process here, but I think now you've seen this telescope apart and you've seen some of the, let's say, improvements to the secondary at least that I've suggested to you, certainly when you have a second-hand one, then this will become a much more familiar process and easy for you to follow. So let's get on with that. No more waffling. Let's try and get on with that, and I'll show you what I'm doing. Again, this is a 3mm. Right now I'm sticking with the secondary, and we have a 3mm Allen key to adjust the grub screws. And what you're trying to achieve, well, I'm almost achieving it now with the phone, but it's difficult to film, as you hopefully understand, is I'm trying to get a consistent, even white light to collimate against. Now you can see, hopefully by this phone, the crosshairs on the inside of the collimation tube, and you can see how they're falling on the dot of the secondary and the donut of the primary. Now again, sorry, let me just readjust that. The process here is using your eye, of course, and making very fine adjustments to the secondary first, then the primary, is to get all three in alignment. That is the crosshair, the dot on the secondary, and the donut of the primary. Once you've achieved that, you have achieved collimation of a Takahashi Epsilon telescope. That also applies for the new telescopes. Now the new telescopes have a different primary cell design. They have the push-pull bolt system, which makes them much easier to collimate. So let's address that now for those, at least for those with the older telescope. let's discuss the challenge that they face with the older Epsilon-ED 180. Okay, there is an issue with the primary cell construction of these Takahashis, and it's to do with the primary mirror cell screws, the way it's set up. So these are the screws that come with the original Takahashi primary mirror cells. I was lucky when I bought this telescope to receive a complete set of new screws. Probably you can see, yeah, the previous people attempt to make adjustments to this are certainly shown on these screws, so I put the new ones on. Now, the issue is simple. This is screwed into the primary mirror cell, and this is the screw that retains the primary mirror cell to the telescope tube itself. What this means, because invariably you'll have the front end of the telescope pointing upwards, when you start to adjust the primary mirror cell, when you loosen these screws, you can see that gravity will be working against you, in that the mirror cell will, of course, don't allow it to fall on the floor, but the mirror cell will start to fall backwards. So you have to, when you're making adjustments to the primary mirror cell, by turning this external screw here, the outside. So the idea would be, let me just get this correct for you, that you would adjust this screw on the outside, which would push in or out the primary mirror cell by adjusting this screw, this outer nut here. The inner nut is then to lock it off once you've found the right position, and this screw is to retain it to pull it up against the telescope tube. So unfortunately, when Takahashi built the original Epsilons, this design doesn't really help you very much in that gravity is working against you. So what I do, of course, is put my hand at the back of the primary mirror cell when I'm making these adjustments, in daylight of course, and hold it forward. Once make a slight adjustment, hold it forward and see how that adjustment has affected the movement of the donut with the dot and the cross in the eyepiece. And again, this is just a slow iterative process. Start with getting the cross over the dot of the secondary, getting the dot of the secondary as close as possible to the donut. If it's way out on the donut of the primary mirror cell, probably your primary mirror cell needs to be adjusted at that point. Then adjust the primary mirror cell to bring the donut more correct, more in alignment with the dot, and slowly bring them into alignment. And that's how you essentially collimate it. And this is the one issue that, again, the other issue you might have with the older Epsilon180EDs. This is not the most useful design for collimating these telescopes. The good news is when you've got a newer Epsilon, you have the proper, or the, let's say, more normal push-pull grub screws on the back of the primary mirror cell. So this is a hangover from the older Epsilon180EDs. So far, thank you for your attention. That's it, really. What more can I explain? Of course, leave any comments if anything is not clear to you what I've done here. But hopefully you can now successfully collimate your Takahashi Epsilon180ED telescope. Finally, one last thing is I want to mention is there's another upgrade on my telescope, and that is here. You can see the focuser is not the standard, let's say, focus trunnion that you would have with the Takahashi. I find the ones that delivered with these telescopes to be completely inadequate, and to be honest with you, not in keeping with the quality of the Epsilon series of telescopes. And this is a nice upgrade to do to your Epsilons. I've done it on both mine, both on the 130 and this 180. And I'll get the box now. Again, not sponsored at all. There are actually some very expensive feather touch add-on focusers for the Epsilon series, and they are truly very expensive. This one came from China. I changed mine, well, not so long ago, August 24, and it's Oasis focuser for the Takahashi telescope. So if you look for Oasis focuser, and I'll put I don't know if I have the link to this, but I'll put the description of this in the video. So if you want to make this upgrade yourself, it's definitely worthwhile, and I think it's only about $180 maybe €150, and it helps to better support the automatic focuser from ZWO or any other automatic focuser that you might also be using. So with that, I'll bring the video to an end. I'll ask you to please subscribe, please like and share. These technical videos on collimation of telescopes don't really do very well on YouTube, so please give it all the love and support that you can, and I'll do my best to answer any further questions that you might have in the comments. Bye for now.